This is the Linguistics Podcast. Questions or comments can be directed to Twitter at LinguistChris or via email to linguistchris@gmail.com. Hello and welcome to the Linguistics Podcast. My name is Chris, and today I want to talk about constructed languages, colloquially known as Conlangs. A conlang is an artificial language. It's a language which is produced by a person or a group of people, and they're very linguistically interesting for this reason. In order to construct a language, you need to be incredibly descriptive with the grammar. Okay, so in order to describe how the language connects form and meaning in a way that will allow people to use the language, you need to be descriptively adequate. So that is to say, you need to cover all aspects of phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics. So not only how does the language put words together, but what constitutes a word in the language, how are those words pronounced, in what way does the language categorize entities and objects. So what is the ontology that forms the semantics of the language? All these questions need to be answered in order for a conlang to be used by people. Now, that's not to say that there aren't different levels of conlangs. Some are more descriptive than others. And of course, we would expect this with any endeavor of this type. But some conlangs are very, very well described indeed and can be used as full languages and do have the full infinite potential for expression, as we would expect of a natural human language. Now, when I say natural language, of course, I'm meaning a language which is not artificially constructed, but is extant in the normal way. So a language like German would be a natural language. It's come about because of historical relationships with other languages and so on and so forth. A language like Esperanto, now Esperanto is a very famous constructed language, and so that's the first one I'm going to cover. It is artificial. It was made, it was made by a great many people. It was first published in 1887. It was, I should say, the first book that detailed the grammar of Esperanto was published in 1887 by a man named Zamenhof. And the idea behind Esperanto was to have a sort of lingua franca, if you will, but one which was not French. So one which was a shared language between peoples which was neutral in terms of region or political affiliation or what have you. So it was really designed as a language to be used internationally. And the reason I bring it up is because it's estimated to have as many as 1,000 native speakers. So that means 1,000 people who have been speaking Esperanto as one of their first languages from birth. Now, there's no suggestion of monolingualism here, so more than likely all of these native speakers also speak something else, so they would be native bilinguals. But still, it's rather remarkable that you have 1,000 people, as many as 1,000 people, that are fluent in a constructed language, so fluent that they are native. Now, that's not to say that there aren't a great number of people that learn Esperanto as a second language. There's as many as 2 million estimated speakers of Esperanto as a second language, and many of those people, of course, would be fluent speakers in Esperanto. So not native, but still fluent. That, once again, is an incredible statistic, considering that this is a made-up language. I mean, a conlang is just that. It's an artificial language. But Esperanto is quite popular as an artificial language, even though many of you may not have heard of it before. What constitutes Esperanto? How is it made up? Well, to be honest, it's not that linguistically interesting. It's a sort of a mishmash of Indo-European structures in general. It's agglutinative in morphology, which is sort of similar to Turkish or something like that. But in terms of the lexicon, it's very, very closely related to Romance languages and or Germanic languages. And the phonology sort of mimics a Slavic-type phonology. So linguistically interesting? Well, yes. It's kind of, if you had to go back in Indo-European and decide what general properties of Indo-European were, you might come up with something similar to Esperanto, actually. It's not that far off the mark. However, as a conlang, it's certainly one of the most popular ones out there. But that's not why I consider conlangs interesting. Okay, so things like Esperanto are interesting historically, in my opinion. Whether or not they're really used as lingua francas today, I'm not too sure of that. And actually, before I move on to another language, I wanted to give you guys a sample of what Esperanto sounds like. This is from a YouTube video, which I will post a link to in the show notes. So, as you're listening to Esperanto, to me it sounds very sort of romance-esque, if you will, to use a romance suffix to describe romance-ness. But it sounds most Spanish, I think, more Spanish than French sounding, obviously. But anyway, so here's a sample of Esperanto.
Ni, anoj de la tutmonda movado por la progresigo de Esperanto, direktas ĉi tiun manifeston al ĉiuj registaroj, internaciaj organizoj kaj homoj de bona volo.
So that's a sample of spoken Esperanto. Again, the video that's taken from will be in the show notes. And so that's very interesting, right? I mean, it's interesting to hear a language that you know is artificial. In other words, not natural. But let me get back on point here. So the reason I think conlangs are interesting is not things like Esperanto, but rather things like Klingon. So Klingon, I think you have to cover... anytime you're going over constructed languages, you have to at least give Klingon a mention. Now, with that, let me give the caveat that Klingon originally was not a full language. So Klingon was designed by a linguist named Mark Okrand, and originally it was made to give more depth to the Star Trek movies. So I believe it was Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, where they first wanted to have spoken Klingon. Actually, it might have been Star Trek 3. Yeah, I think it was Star Trek 3, actually. Where they first wanted to have spoken Klingon in the movie. And the idea was that the studio, or rather the scriptwriter, I guess, told Mark Okrand what they wanted to be able to hear in Klingon. So he knew what lines would be needed. And so he only made enough of the language to generate those sentences of Klingon. That was the original idea behind it. Now, over time, with Trekkies and what have you, the language has been expanded such that it is indeed a full language now. And you do have people that study Klingon and try and learn it. Obviously, as a hobby, it's not used in any sort of real communicative capacity, but as a hobby language, it is indeed a full language now. And Klingon is interesting because it has properties that you could only find in a constructed language. And this is what I find most interesting about it. What do I mean by that? Well, it doesn't follow normal kinds of patterns that we would expect in a human language. Okay, so for example, markedness. This has been mentioned before. So unmarked properties are more common than marked properties. So, for example, the V, which is the labiodental fricative, V, voice labiodental fricative, is never found in a human language unless that language also has the voiceless counterpart, F. And that's because the voiceless one is unmarked with respect to the voiced one. Okay, so it's a near universal that you never find the voiced without the voiceless. But Klingon you do. So Klingon has V but not F. And that's a property that no other human language, to my knowledge, has. And of course, because it's a constructed language, you can say that that's a property of the language, that it doesn't have an F sound, but it does have a V sound. And that's just incredibly interesting to me, because you never find that in a natural language. So you can break universal tendencies and absolute universals, and you can break any of that kind of stuff when you're constructing a language, and that makes it very, very interesting. You can also have languages which sort of mimic... well, let me back up a little bit. So a lot of these languages are designed for fiction work. So Tolkien is a great example. Tolkien, for his Lord of the Rings series and Middle Earth, if you look up just Elvish, there's tons of different Elvish languages that he made up. Tolkien was actually very much a closet linguist, and he has a great number of, still to this day, unpublished works concerning the linguistics of his languages that he put in his books. And Elvish not only is Elvish is a Conlang, I guess, in a loose sense, but really it's a family of Conlangs. I mean, this is an incredibly complex endeavor that Tolkien went out upon. And really, you could spend years just looking at the intricacies of Elvish dialects or Elvish sub-languages, whatever you want to call them. But the thing about it is the phonological rule, the phonotactics of Elvish languages are designed such that they're very airy sounding. So you have a lot of open syllables, for example. And this is designed in that way such that the elves are supposed to be kind of these, airy people, for lack of a better term. They're supposed to be sort of not restrictive, in a lot of senses, kind of mysterious. And so having these open syllables is supposed to sort of assist in this image of the elvish kind. And that's one thing you can do with Conlangs when they're related to fictional work. So going back to Klingon, even Klingon has a lot of sort of guttural sounds, and it's supposed to mimic their sort of warish nature, their violent nature. It's supposed to be kind of alluded to in the nature of the language itself, the phonotactics of the language. And so this is a very interesting fact about Conlangs, is that they can mimic some feature of the people that are supposed to speak it. Now, obviously, this is not true of every Conlang, because some Conlangs are just created to be spoken by hobbyists. They're not related to any fictional work. But the ones that are, to me, are most interesting for that reason. Now, I should also mention, obviously I don't have time to go into a lot of different Conlangs in the podcast, so I just wanted to do a general overview of what a Conlang is and why they're interesting. And I think the reason that I've always sort of been attracted to Conlangs is that you can say a lot about fictional people by designing their language. So that's one thing that's just kind of always drawn me to them. But they're also interesting because they, like I said, they force you to answer all these linguistic questions and to think about just how complex a language really is. I would be remiss if I did not mention or give a plug to another podcast that is linguistically related specifically for Conlangs. It's called the Conlangery Podcast. You can find information about it at conlangery.com. And this podcast, really, they go over, I think they are designing their own languages or Conlangs. To be honest, I don't listen to this podcast that much, but I think they both go through different Conlangs and are designing their own Conlang, to my knowledge. And it's interesting because they go through things like WALS, so the World Atlas of Language Structures, to sort of assist in their descriptions of linguistic phenomena in Conlangs. So that's very interesting. That would be an interesting listen, I think, for any of you who are interested in constructed languages. So that's actually all I have for this episode. I just wanted to do a quick one just to talk about Conlangs really briefly. If there is a specific Conlang that interests a lot of people, please send me an email or tweet me at LinguistChris and let me know what that Conlang is, be it Klingon or Elvish or anything, because I could do an episode on a specific constructed language if you guys are interested. And like I said, the interest there would be the fact that you have to get so detailed in your description. And because of that, you have to sort of draw upon these concepts that are very linguistically relevant. So, for example, I could do an episode on on Klingon, looking at, I guess, the ontology of Klingon nouns or something like that. And from that, you end up getting a lot of information about general semantics and all that sort of good stuff. So that's one way to attack things, I guess, if you guys sound interested. However, I should mention I do have a lot of suggestions for episodes already, and I'm getting to them one by one as soon as I can. So if you have sent me an episode suggestion, don't worry, I haven't forgot about it. I've got a long list of upcoming episodes, and hopefully yours will be one of those which I make an episode for. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for listening. As usual, you can contact me via email, linguistchris@gmail.com, or via Twitter @linguistchris. Thanks again.